Do you wish you had more cash to invest and grow your wealth? Do you struggle to set and keep a budget? These things may seem simple in theory, but in reality, this is a really tough thing for a lot of people. Hi, I'm Sam, and thanks for tuning into our channel where we explore a 3-part strategy to achieving financial freedom. Earn more, spend less, and invest the rest. I'm super excited to be recording today's video because this whole piece around spending less is really at the foundation of achieving financial freedom. Having extra money at the end of every month is not just about building up a nest egg, it's actually the fuel that is going to kickstart and drive your wealth engine. In this video, I'm going to share with you the budgeting and saving process that Chris and I have used for the past 5 years. We have found this system incredibly effective for us, and in fact, if you compare us now to where we were 5 years ago, before we started implementing these practices, we spent nearly 90 to 95% of our income every month on our expenses. And now, after consistently applying these principles, we only spend about 20%, which leaves us nearly 80% every month that we can save and reinvest to continue to grow our own wealth. I'm going to walk you through each step of the process with examples and share with you some practical tips to help you design and implement your own savings and budgeting plan. So let's get started. Step number 1, work backwards to determine what you can afford and differentiate between wants and needs. For this, I want to break it down month by month, and I actually want to jump over to a spreadsheet so that I can walk you through the numbers step by step. Let's dig into step number 1 by working together on this spreadsheet, which I made to show you a very practical and simplified example of how you can get started building your own budgeting plan. The numbers you see here are based off of data from the MIT Livable Wage Calculator, which is an outstanding research-based information source that I would strongly encourage you to check out, and I linked to the main website in the video description. For instructional purposes, I have used average numbers for a couple living in Florida with 1 child and 2 working adults, who each make pre-tax salaries of $55,000 per year, totaling to $110,000 for their household. Of course, these numbers are estimates and your expenses will vary. Let's start at the top line, which is annual net income. Your net income is what you take home after all of the deductions, and it's very important to use this number and not your gross income when budgeting, because your net income accurately represents the real amount of money you have control over to save and to spend. In this example, I've set a nice round number of a net income of $80,000, which is roughly what a family earning a gross income of $110,000 would take home after deductions. This number is also going to vary depending on where you live and whether or not you have state income taxes. In researching for this video, I found a great online calculator that you can use to better estimate your net income, which I have also linked in the video description. When you divide the net income of $80,000 by 12, you get the net monthly income of $6,667. So this is the amount of money that we are starting with every month. Now let's move on to expenses, and you can see here that I have divided them into the category of needs and wants. This is really straightforward. You just need to list out all of the things that you have to spend money on each month and all of the things that you like to spend money on but aren't a necessity. In this example, you can see that I have grouped together some expenses under a broad term like housing or transport. I've done this in today's video to give you a very clear starting point, but as you implement this practice yourself, I would strongly advise you to break out each expense in as much detail as possible, because the more you know about your spending, the more successful you will be in budgeting and saving. At this point, you may be wondering, how can I determine how much I should spend on each category? Many people are advocates of the 50-30-20 rule, which states that you should allocate 50% to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings. I feel like that's a good system in theory, but in reality, sticking to those ratios can often be very challenging or even unrealistic for many people. To highlight this, I made a quick table to show how things would look if we applied the 50-30-20 rule to this budget. So as I uncover the table, you'll see that the main challenge presents itself when we see that if we followed the rule of allocating 50% to needs, we would only have $3,333 to spend on this category. That's nearly $1,000 less than what we have budgeted for so far. You can see I haven't overestimated the expenses listed in the needs category. And in fact, when I pulled these numbers, I took the approach of going to the range of just making ends meet. So while you might be able to shave off a few $100s, it would be really difficult to only spend 50% on your needs without increasing your income. Quick side note here. Chris and I are currently developing heaps of content on the topic of increasing your income that will be released soon. In summary, I recommend using the 50-30-20 rule more as a guide and a goal if you are first starting out. Currently, you may even be spending 80% or more on your needs, and in that case, you're in a position where you need to close the gap between where you currently are in your spending and where you want to be. But please do not be discouraged if this is true for you. In fact, knowing this information is the first step in improving your financial future. And remember, this is exactly the position we were in 5 years ago, and now we spend 20% on our needs and wants combined. So this process really does work. And as we move into step number 2, I'm going to share a super important tip that will decrease your spending every month.
Number 2, pay your savings first. Now, this requires a shift in mindset. For most of us, including myself 5 years ago, we take the approach of, okay, I have this much money that I earn and I have this many expenses, and if there's anything left over at the end of the month, that's what I'll save. But in reality, that absolutely does not work if you are serious about growing your wealth and achieving financial freedom. You have to be purposeful and mindful and prioritize putting money aside before anything else that's going to go into your savings or your investment fund. So I want to jump back over to the spreadsheet and show you how applying this practice is going to affect our budget planning.
All right, we are back on our handy dandy little spreadsheet. You will notice now that there is a new addition in the form of a savings section down at the bottom. And I have put this in red because it shows you exactly what I do not want you to do. Instead of treating our savings as whatever is left over at the end of the month, we are going to prioritize putting that money aside first and using it to guide us in determining what choices we make for our wants and what we can actually afford when we estimate our needs. First, we're going to delete this section. Then, we will insert a new row in our needs section. In this example, setting aside $1,000 a month is very reasonable. And in order to make up for the new $53 overage, I'm simply going to reduce the amount I will spend on dining out. There you have it. It's as simple as that. Pay your savings first.
All right, here's my tip. I want you to set up an auto debit to a separate account at the beginning of every month to pay your savings first. And I actually want this to be a totally separate bank account, something that you put aside, and once the money is there, that means you're not going to have any risk of spending it because it's already automatically been debited. Whether you start with $100 a month, $1,000 a month, or $5,000 a month, make it a priority to pay your savings first. And by setting up an auto debit, this is going to actually enable you to consistently put this into practice. All right, step number 3. And I really want to highlight this one because I feel like of all of the steps, this is the most important to actually implement, especially when you're first starting out. This is going to really change your behaviors and your mindsets around spending. And so this is step number 3. You have to track your expenses on a daily basis, and you have to do it yourself. So simply using your debit card and then looking at your app and saying, okay, this is how much I spent, that's not going to cut it. You have to hold yourself super accountable for at least 3 months during this process. So I want to share with you my own practical example. So when Chris and I decided that we really wanted to start saving because we wanted to invest, our mindset had changed, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep a journal every single day and track all of my expenses. And I am not exaggerating when I tell you it made my head explode, and not in a good way. I was looking through and I just couldn't believe how much I was spending on like little superfluous things. You know, it was like, oh, I stopped in at the grocery store because I went for a walk and I wanted a gourmet chocolate bar. Or it was like, oh, I thought that I was spending about $50 a week on gas, but actually I'm spending $150 a week on gas. You have to manually do this. Now, I'm not saying that you need a written journal. I think if that works for you, that's great. That's what I did. I just had like a little notebook, something like this big, and every day I would put the date up at the top and then I would write exactly what I had spent money on. Now, if writings and little notebooks are not your thing, there are tons of apps that can help you with this. But the thing is, you need to manually do it yourself because you need that degree of accountability. You know, I really equate it to counting calories when you're on a diet. When you first go on a diet and you're really serious about losing weight, you need to know like what it is you're putting into your body, and you need to know how many calories you're consuming. And most of the time, and I've done this myself when I've tried to lose weight, I'm like, oh my God, I'm eating so many calories. The same thing happens when you are setting a budget. So you need to make sure that you take the time to account for each and every single expense every day, so that you really take a hard look at exactly what you're spending. And that's going to enable you to implement step number 4. So step number 4 is all about determining where you can save money on. Where can you cut costs? After you do this tracking of expenses exercise, I guarantee you that you will be able to find places where you can cut costs. And then once you've identified those, you need to circle back and redo your budget again. Step number 5 is a never-ending step because step number 5 is all about implementation. This is something that you need to revisit on a regular basis. Once you understand the principles, you're going to start saving. Ideally, you're going to take that saving and you're going to invest it. And then you're going to start growing your wealth. You're going to start increasing your passive income. And therefore, you're going to need to readjust your budgets. You've got to stick to this plan in order for it to work. It's just like anything. If you don't pay attention, if you don't work on it, it's not going to serve you the way that it should. So step number 5 is about continually putting these practices into place, revisiting your budgets, continually being aware of how much you're spending, and setting your priorities to identify the difference between needs and wants. All right, here's my last tip, and it has to do with implementation. It's really difficult to implement a strict budget for a really long period of time. It can get exhausting. So that's why I think that it's really important that you make sure that you treat yourself just a little. You've got to set aside something that is going to be your fun money. Life is short and you want to make sure that you enjoy the journey. So for Chris and I, we really tighten our belts in a lot of areas of our life, but we really love to travel. And so every year we set aside a certain portion of our income and we dedicate it just to travel and to have fun and to really do it in a nice way because that brings us a lot of pleasure. Now, we do it in a way that's still balanced. It still follows the rules that I explained to you at the beginning of the video. But what it does is it gives us something to look forward to, and it makes us feel like all of this hard work that we're putting in isn't for nothing. It's like, oh man, we're gonna have to wait 10 years before we enjoy our lives. You need to have those things that bring you pleasure and that you enjoy. But I compared budgeting to exercising or dieting or going on a weight loss plan earlier, and this is actually really similar. I equate this to like having a cheat meal as part of your diet. The thing is, you want to have it to make sure that you're not suffering and you just go, oh, F this, I'm just gonna give up. But in order for it to be effective and for you to still have a plan that works, you have to only have that one cheat meal. You can't go, okay, it's a cheat week or it's a cheat month. And the same thing applies to budgeting. So you set aside that portion that is for fun for you, for your family, and then you've got to stick to it. So you can't just go, okay, fun money, cat's out of the bag, let's just spend everything. All right, guys, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, give it a like and subscribe to our channel. All of the resources that I used for today's video are linked in the description below, and we welcome your feedback in the comments. All right, I'll see you next time, and remember, earn more, spend less, and invest the rest.